Hi, everyone.
I can't tell if it's just really quiet or my audio is not working.
Very quiet.
That's the benefit of the virtual meeting. You can mute yourself.
Do we have somebody running the meeting?
It doesn't.
Jonas
Oh, I can
Jonas
hear.
is gonna be out for this meeting. I can run this meeting.
Oh, I see him in here. Or is that just his recorder?
Just a recorder.
Okay.
We can get it started when we hit 5. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we should get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Week weekly catalog meeting. Thanks. We have something to discuss today. In the agenda, we have 2 topics. First is the event endpoint. Second is replace table transaction behavior. Let's get started with the first one. Christian, you wanna take that one?
Yeah, sure. So I guess regarding the event endpoints, I think roughly a week ago or so, I sent another update to the mailing list, which incorporated some of the changes that were requested or discussed during the last sync. I couldn't be there, but I listened to the recording and I think there were some valid points. Out of the discussion, unless I missed something, there was mainly like one open point that maybe requires a little bit more discussion, and that is the update or the table update operation. Currently, it has a field like updates, which is a required field. And there were some concerns that this is potentially confidential data, as we might consider schemas confidential. And so we might want an option to discard this and make it and mark it optional. My take on that is that a table update operation without the actual table update hasn't much value, which is why I made it required in the first place. There are enough other endpoints now with eText, especially enough other ways that allow us to figure out if a table has changed or not. which is why I would ideally, I think, would like it to remain required. Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, a catalog implementation can still, of course, or should, of course, not hand out the event if a client is not authorized to see this kind of data, right? So yeah, I guess that's my point. Ryan?
I was just going to make exactly that point, which is I think that the way to do access controls here is to filter the events rather than filtering within the event. So if you can't view a table's information or you don't have sufficient access to know about the table schema, then you shouldn't be seeing the change event in general.
Yeah. Anyone disagrees? Otherwise, that point is solved. Okay. Then I think we leave it as it is. Yeah, apart from that, the main changes since the last community sync is that I removed the table metadata field from create and register table. Especially there was a concern that registering table might yield larger metadata files, which then would need to be stored somewhere, which is something I can follow. Also, I think that obtaining the initial table metadata is something that can easily be done via the load table endpoint and doesn't necessarily need to be as part of the events. What we lose by that is the event endpoint having, full event log that allows to recreate a table state from scratch, basically, because if we don't have the initial state, there's nothing to mutate from. But I think this is something that we can live with. So yeah. And yeah, I guess otherwise we've been discussing this already for a few weeks. I don't have any, or I'm not aware of any other change requests basically that are out here. Daniel?
No, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, so I would just say basically, I guess I would like to proceed with this then. So everyone who still has something who wants to change this, please voice this out soon. I gave everyone in the mailing list already a chance to voice with 1 week ahead. So I think I hope that we can proceed. Yeah.
Yeah. So my comment was really just about and I think I mentioned this a couple of meetings back, which was if we think we're in a state where we're ready to go, what does that mean for providing a reference implementation? Because this is an area where we kind of we don't have a good answer for the scan plan APIs currently. It would be really great if we had some sort of thought about, can we put this in the Iceberg REST test harness or something like that, so that there is a reference implementation and it's not just accumulating in the spec without any real implementation out there.
Okay, yeah. So okay, so basically what we want, we're not really sure what we want, but we want some kind of implementation there that goes with the spec, right?
Yeah, I mean, the REST harness is really lightweight. So it could just be something where you just track operations in memory and then you emit events based on request and response objects that we provide in the libraries, similar to other request and response objects. And, that I think the hardest part about that whole thing is just the whole serialization, deserialization of those events and making sure that we have everything there. That may even flush out any representation issues we have with the event schemas, but just doing that, and then in the test harness, you just wire in every event that happens, and you could provide the full list of operations for the entire time that the test harness is running, or something like that. I'm happy to work with people on how we integrate it in the test harness. It's actually the majority of the work is those request and response objects.
Okay, should this be part of the same PR, or should this be some
PR?
What is the PR for the spec changes?
It's
if we agree on the big things, we should probably go do a thorough round of review on the things.
Totally makes sense. So the PR is here. It's also linked. All the diffs that I always post in the document are pointing here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ah, yeah, okay. I see one more review there that I haven't commented yet.
Kevin?
Yeah, hey, I think the test harness is a great idea. I think it'd be super helpful for other clients to kind of integrate with this. I guess my question is around like, you know, what is the timeline for like I guess the next steps, right? Like, should we merge the PR as a spec change first and then start? I mean, we can work on those two in parallel, but just curious, like what model we would like to proceed with.
I think that's a great question because one thing that I think has bitten us slightly in the past is that we kind of vote on spec changes to the Rust spec, and then like those immediately go live. Like it's not like in the table spec where we have changes that are queued up for the next, you know, major version and things like that. And so I think that the Rest spec being out there or having changes in the Rest spec kind of makes it more real and required than we otherwise would be. So it makes it harder for us to realize in the implementation phase that there are problems that we need to fix. So do we want to have something like I don't want to say release process because that seems heavyweight, but do we want to have something like keep the spec PR open until we also merge the test and implementation PR? I think we're all open to ideas here.
Was the last spec change the scan planning one? Rest spec change?
That's the last major one. There've been like
Right.
little minor things we've added here and there, but that was
Right.
the last major one. And that's
Yeah.
a perfect example of something that's been in there for a while and
Yeah.
still don't really have a reference implementation for. So
Yeah. I think we can use this opportunity to kind of model future major changes for the Rest spec. I think it makes sense to like at least say, hey, the spec looks great from everyone who's reviewed it. Maybe keep it open for now and then like add implementation. I don't know, Christian, you've been on this for a while. Like, what do you think?
No, like I agree. Like that's a good way forward. So so I guess let's start the review process on the PR then. Move away from the doc into the PR on one hand. On the other hand, try and write an implementation. Write an implementation, and then once we're reasonably confident that everything fits, we can start merging the spec. Sounds like a plan. So I'm not a Java guy. Is there anyone who could or maybe let's make it the other way around. If there's anyone willing to help implement this, it would be great if you guys could contact me. I'm happy to support. I'm also able to write basic things, but I'm sure I would get the structure wrong.
Christian, I think I would be willing to sit down with you and break them up into good first issue kind of things, and then we can kind of farm from the community. I don't know necessarily if we're going to get that answer right here, who is the best person to kind of jump in and start to contribute. But I think writing up what we think individual pieces are that we would put together, REST request and response, the endpoint and catalog handler updates. There's a couple different areas that we know that we need to update in order to support this. So we could sit down and just write up some of those good first issues, and then
awesome.
Who's interested to jump in and contribute?
Perfect. Sounds good. Kevin?
Yeah, and I think that would really help with some of the REST clients, right? In terms of prototyping, Python, Rust, Go will be super helpful. Once we have the design structure down, it's just easier to translate into those implementations, and then those are kind of good litmus tests for to interact with the test service.
Yep, sounds good. Perfect. Okay, so we create a few issues. Then I would ask everyone to review directly the PR. I'll put this also in a mail on the mailing list later on, the next steps, so that everyone knows. Yeah, and I think that concludes the point of the event spec, unless anyone has anything to add. Now is the time.
So just to reiterate, we're not voting right now, right? Like we're not
Yep.
voting on the spec change.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks for all the discussions. That's a great one. I think we can move to the next one, which is replace table transaction behavior. I'm not sure who put there.
Hey, yeah, that was me. So I can
Is that
explain
a
a little.
REST catalog thing or I'm just wondering because like I know that there's quite a bit to discuss on the REST API, and like I think the behavior of replace table transactions doesn't necessarily affect REST at all.
Yeah, so there is no API change, but like which APIs we can use to implement the replace transaction. Like we have the choice of using drop and create table versus update table API. I'm also happy to kind of maybe move it to another meeting, the other sync if it aligns more over there.
I think that the question was, does this belong in the larger community sync? Just because people who may care about like the table behaviors may not be here because they may not have as much interest in the catalog behaviors. So
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll move it to another meeting.
Yeah, and this affects basically all catalogs.
Robert?
Yeah, just an add on that topic. So when I read that discussion, I realized that, for example, things like some ETL things do things like drop table and create table as select. I think that would also that falls into the same bucket, I think, but that requires also changes to tools like dbt or something to support that. So just want to mention that.
okay. So can are you okay with moving that to the other meeting? I know
Yeah, sounds
pushed
good.
it out a little
Thanks.
bit, but
Let's move to the next one, which is secure view.
so I actually dropped this on the list, and it was mostly because like I saw the discussion thread come up, and I know that was originally targeted kind of at the Polaris community, but they also sought feedback from the Iceberg community on that particular approach. So I think it would be good for us to have a discussion and just like some of the concerns that we have with what that might entail, and maybe raise awareness of like, what the side effects of doing that might be that could be problematic. So I don't know if anybody who is part of that discussion, I think Russell or somebody else that was on the proposal, maybe if you could just like bring everybody up to speed onto like, hey, what is the high level? What are the objectives? Things like that.
Yeah, I think Prashant is probably the right person. This is mostly his talk. Do you want to take it away, or do you want me to go over a high level? You're on mute, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. Sure. I'll share the doc, share the screen, and try to walk the audience with that. Is my screen visible? I'll enlarge it. Is my screen visible?
Yep.
Yes.
Just zoom
So-
in a little.
Sure. Is it visible now?
It's visible. If you could make it a little bigger.
Yeah. Is it visible? Is it big enough?
It's not getting bigger for me.
I believe you should select page feed, on the menu, 100%.
I'll
Great.
drop the doc in the discussion in the chat as well.
Yeah. Good. So essentially, what we want to do is that if you have a row and a column level policy defined on a table, uh, what this means is that we want to give you back a view, which essentially entails the column level policies as the projections and the row level policies as the filters, which an engine is anyways expected to give back or do. Uh, we give it in back a form of a SQL text, which is what we call it as secure view. And what we are saying is that every engine, whenever we do a select from a table, is in the same dilemma that whether that select from an identifier, that what that identifier is it a table or is it a view? And we are just saying that in the worst case, engine will be forced to call both the APIs, basically load table and load view. And essentially for the tables which have fine-grained access control, for them, we just will say that there is no such table. There is only a view. And that view will have the definition. The view definition will contain what are the column policies and row level policies for that particular table attached. So essentially what this means is that now load table will give a 404. And essentially, when we are talking of fine-grained access control, load table for essentially the table metadata object, right? It contains a lot of sensitive informations, right? We talked about. So if you have a fine-grained access control, we can redact the metadata if required. But we essentially want to say that the table now does not exist, but there exists a view for read-only operations. So we have found a way, we are here proposing a way in which you don't have to change a spec, but at the same time, you can enforce the fine-grained access control policies for an engine who just understands Iceberg REST, and you will be able to enforce that part of it. So here is this just a normal flow diagram on, and we took a standard engine like Trino. We did a POC as well. If you want, we can go into details of how simple it is to do this with the Trino. And the main benefit for this is a couple of things, like engines don't need to understand the policies. Engine just needs to just enforce what they already have bare bones with. The second thing is that it can work with the engines which were released like years ago. Number two is that. The third part is like these policy changes require very intrusive changes inside the engine because we need to get the column projections and the row filters directly embedded into the planner of engine, and that too in a way that it does not fiddles with another security predicates, reorders, and everything. But for us, what we are saying is that if we give you a view definition, just execute that view definition securely, and that you will be done with it. So that's the entire idea about the secure views and the USP about why views will be better. Now, there are some questions like, how are we dealing with dialect specific things? And for that, uh, we have thought about all of those things, and we are saying that we want the dialect specific complexity to be handled in UDFs. And we have, and for defining this policy, we have even defined the structure on how these policies will be defined. So basically, the row level policies are defined as Iceberg expressions because these Iceberg expressions are very portable and they are like easy to share with for cross engines. So Iceberg expressions there, we define that, and we have also like found a way to do the identity resolution, server-side identity resolution, which we are calling. A while back in the Polaris community, I started a thread, and I was insisting that we should force the identity resolution to happen on the server side. So I would like to talk about that as well, because this is something that will take a lot of burden away from the engines. So essentially, what I wanted to show is that suppose you define an email mask, which is modeled as a UDF, right? And you have defined it as like, okay, your current principal role is analyst, right? Now, let's say your view definition says that your email mask, email mask needs to be attached to a particular column, and you store that in the policy. The whole redirection flow can work like this. So you asked to select star from a table, you got back a view which says that, hey, the view says that select email mask of column mail, right? And then you get to the Polaris, get to an Iceberg catalog, which holds the definition of what the email mask is. When you're fetching the email mask, you see what the definition of the email mask is, and you replace
For sure.
the
Yeah.
context functions.
Just sorry for
and then return back.
interruption. Your screen is frozen if you are sure of something.
Okay.
And there's two hands up, and I'm not sure if you want to address the question first, or you can continue. Up to you.
If I can get 2 more minutes, I'll just wrap it up, and we can then go from there. What do you think? Or I'm happy to take the questions right now as well.
Your screen works now.
And then I'll just wrap it up. Okay. So essentially, here is like we have so another important aspect is context functions and the identity resolution. So here is one sample case, and in a case where IRC has been established as a function catalog in which we store the definition of function inside the catalog, and it has context functions, or we call it context variables, meaning that they're supposed to be evaluated server side and replaced server side. And when we say server, it's catalog what we meant. So we have a UDF which says that, hey, email mask says that the current principal role is, when the current principal role is analyst, give me the value, otherwise give me star, star, star. I store it in the policy which attaches the proper email mask to the particular column. My view definition now will contain the email mask on top of the particular column. So the overall flow, what will now look like is I have a select on the table, and obviously I'm going to get back a view, which essentially says that, hey, your view definition is you have an email mask on column email. Now, when my engine, who knows that email mask is a UDF, IRC UDF, it's going to go back to the catalog to get the definition of what email mask is. And now when we are fetching the email mask from our server backend, we will replace the context variables to the value with what I am authenticated with. So basically, if I was an engineer and my current principal role was engineer, so what I will essentially end up returning is that case when engineer is an analyst, then return value, otherwise return this as a definition, and this will force the engine, because this will Boolean simplify. So it will constant fold, and it will evaluate to star, star, star. So all the column projections will be returned as star, star, star. We did a POC also for this and a while back, and this is a Trino version which was released a while back. And so we just had bare bones. We just said that, hey, I just wrote the code for redirection. So I added two rows into the table, and so this table has 2 rows, and I just made a view which says that, hey, show me only rows greater than 1. And I wrote the indirection code, and it just shows you the value 4. So yeah, that's the overall thoughts and what POC we have done on Trino a while back for the Indian switch starts. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much for the patience. I'll start taking your questions.
So,
Brian's first.
thank you. I think that we're mixing together multiple ideas here. So I'm going to try and pull some of those apart. The first one is the idea of a secure view, which definitely exists, right? The idea that you can run a view as the invoker or as the owner, or however you want to interpret those 2 roles, that's definitely a thing. And I'll come back to this, but I think that that's a thing that we should support. And I think that there's a very easy way to do it. We should definitely work on that. Then there is the idea of dynamically injecting secure views for the purpose of injecting access control policy. I used to be a fan of that idea. So like, I totally understand where you're coming from here, but there are two things. I'm no longer a fan for a few reasons. One of which is it's not necessarily how these catalogs interact with one another. Like we were just talking about the views endpoint, and how does catalog mirroring interact with a user-specific version of a view or a table or whatever? How do you cache those things? In general, I am more of a fan of the idea that the catalog should report faithfully what an object is, and do the fine-grained access control stuff by giving additional context and information to secure systems. However, that said, I don't think that I or the community actually has to have an opinion about this, which is where I want to sort of separate these concepts. So secure views, definitely a thing that we should support. And I think going into how we do that and what additional things we need are definitely good uses of our time. The second thing is, if you want to hijack a table load and return a 404 and have it loaded as a view instead, there's literally nothing that we can do to prevent people from doing that. And in fact, to your point, it works with older engines. It works, whether or not the engine that is receiving the view, understands or cares. So like, there's nothing we can do to prevent it. I would just say we shouldn't necessarily recommend it. It is already supported and like perfectly legal within our API framework, but I would much rather focus our time on how do we make persistent secure views a thing, and what do we need to do to flesh out this space and make it valuable. Like you're talking the UDFs and potentially secure UDFs. How do we load a view and then load a table with a different identity, which I think we actually have an idea for. I would much rather, take the dynamic sort of replacing objects with different objects from the catalog perspective and make that a catalog only implementation decision, and focus our time on the actual components of the API that need to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think we were actually saying that this is the only thing we should be doing. More that this is something we kind of wanted to be able to do right now, with the idea that we're obviously working towards some better ecosystem thing in the future.
I guess my concern is that engine or catalog implementations would pick this up as like the way to do things. And that concerns me because it does have implications for, can I cache the objects coming back? Am I participating in the access control system correctly? Like those sort of things that we try to keep, outside of the spec, what access controls you're actually applying to an object. It sort of muddies that and makes the design space more confusing, in my opinion. Like if I were an implementer trying to implement a catalog that does fine-grained access controls, and I look at this and go, okay, should I be, creating views that are dynamically injected? If so, how do I load the underlying table when I'm actually running that view? And it brings up a lot of, I think, confusing topics that make the implementation worse. So I would say, like, I would prefer to focus on the actual, like, how do we do secure views, assuming that they are static and the same for everyone. Get that working. How do we do UDFs? Get those working. If we want to do user-specific context on table load, how do we do that in a way that the client knows what can be cached or not cached? And like, just separate these things into those those different sections, I guess. But that's
Precisely, I
just
mean,
I mean, I understand. I just, for me, all those discussions are like long time. And I know, yeah.
But doesn't this like incorporate those things? Like we need to be able to have a secure view, whether dynamically generated or static. And we need to solve those challenges. We're talking in this doc about, UDFs. So I'm saying like, you can, as a catalog, definitely do this. There's nothing we can do to stop you. I think the long pole to actually having, this dynamic idea, work out is basically, we need to solve the invoker versus owner identity loading. And once you do that, like I think you're most of the way there if you wanted to do dynamic views. Then the UDF stuff and sending back column masks and row filters on table load, those are other optional things.
Robert?
Yeah, thanks. So I think having something that just works out of the catalog, that sounds super appealing to me and super user-friendly and backwards compatible with all the already released query engines. What's a bit concerning to me is what's actually in this view definition. And as far as I understand the proposal, it's a, let's say, obscure table name of the real table. And what the concern there is, what's stopping me from accessing that base table directly in the same query session?
that we have solved it via so.
I mean, you
the
had
way,
a talk in the explain plan, and the explain plan directly shows you that secret table name. So there's nothing that stops me from accessing the sensitive information directly.
those are
And
just one-shot table names. So after you have done explain some,
yes, but it's accessible, right?
yeah, but after you're done with one shot, you'll not be able to access it anymore.
But how do you do that? I mean, Trino doesn't give you a proper way to do that.
Can I hop in here really quickly? Because this is, I alluded to this earlier. This is, I think, one of the central problems that we need to solve for secure views in general, whether dynamically generated or not. And to do that, I believe that you can use a persistent table name. So you could use like a table UID to load the table or something like that in the dynamic case, or just the original table name in a static view case. But what you would need to do is have a engine identity that is trusted.
Exactly.
So you know that the engine identity is not going to circumvent this. And then the engine also needs to send the context in which this table is referenced. So the engine says, I'm working on behalf of Ryan. I am a trusted engine. I am loading table X in the context of view V.
That's exactly the point, yes.
Yeah, so the engine says, I'm loading this as part of view V, and the catalog then has everything it needs to validate this request. In the context of view V, this table exists and can be loaded using the owner of the view. And so it can insert the owner of the view as that, I guess, principal for that table load.
Yeah.
As long as we have the idea of a secure, trusted engine and the context of what view is the surrounding context for this table load, we should be able to do all of the things server side to address your question, Robert.
Yeah. So looking at Trino, I mean, in Trino, at least if you use the interfaces that are designed for that, you don't have any access to the query plan at all. to the AST, or we'll call it whatever. In Spark, you have the AST, kind of. But the context in which the table is then used, at least in the Spark plan, is a bit, I would say, confusing maybe. So to
Robert,
get
if I'm
one second.
Mhm.
The TLDR, what I'm saying is having the context, like table X is accessed in view Y, that would be really awesome. But I think that's a big change to Trino, potentially, and quite some work in Spark. Yeah, basically that.
If I may try answering this question. So the question is like, you don't want to have explain query, right? Why do we need to have it written in the engine level? I mean, what used to happen is that people, from what I have seen from my past experience, is that if you want to reject a certain type of queries, right? So generally you have a SQL UI and you submit your queries there. And before you can submit it to the compute cluster, you just reject the queries which are trying to do explain or anything of that sort, or the operations that you're not allowed to do, or you can just plainly fail on other things. But yeah, I agree that we need to have a trusted engine concept. We can't give the load table at all. So the way we were thinking about the problem is that there are 4 possible cases. There are trusted engines who don't understand the policy. For them, we will give back the views. The trusted engine which do want policies and are smart enough to enforce this policy will give back those views, and that's why we are using Iceberg expressions. And then because those policies need to be handed over in such a way that the other engines can understand. So the way I was thinking is that that's another mode of the secure engine operation. The third and the fourth mode is non-trusted engine, and for all other possible combination which does not understand the policy and understands the policy, we'll always give back a 404. So these are the 4 cases that we can think of in the matrix that when we return back a view, when we return back a table and everything. So for example, from what I am able to see in Spark, what we are trying to do is that we are having the machinery in which we have from Iceberg expression, create engine expressions, and from engine expression, we can inject it into the planner. And we are already building this infrastructure. So for that, most likely Spark will want to have in the load table itself that we give back the policies and then convert those policies into a given catalyst expression. So this framework is still in progress, but the view can be another mode we can enable or disable based on the headers that a client can send us that, hey, I don't understand the policy, but I'm a trusted engine to you, but I want an access decision rather than an access rather than not an access decision, but giving the load table itself. So yeah.
So I just want to jump in, and like I think Brian and Robert have already addressed a lot of the comments that I was going to make, but I had a couple others. One is just like addressing Russell's question about like the expedience of like, well, you know, we want to be able to get something out that people can use for, you know, row level security, things like that. And I think I would lean into, can we close out the support on the scan plan APIs? Because that also addresses other areas where it's like, you know, there are a lot of engines that are going to be confused by this behavior. If I'm coming in through Python or something like that, and I'm getting like a view response back, that like Python doesn't have any mechanism for processing that in any way currently. And it may just be that user's identity doesn't have access, and it's either return your view or you have to reject, and you get into these very like niche behaviors depending on like what's coming in through that load table endpoint. And then there's like the general confusion of like, well, if in some people's context they see things as views, like what does that mean for like Trino system tables? Like what does that actually report back to a user? That it's a table, but then I can't load it as a table. I think there are a lot of like these secondhand effects of making this behavior different. In fact, this was a discussion point with the Trino team early on where they wanted to make sure that, hey, if we're building this REST API, that we aren't like loading different content based on the user that's coming through like a load table endpoint, because that messes with caching, that messes with like the system's understanding of what table schemas and definitions and how it may be able to reuse those for different planning operations. So I think there are a lot of like secondhand effects to not treating things as they actually are. And I'm just concerned about that. And then for the expedient side, it's like, I think we've made some good progress on the FGAC side. And that's something that like we can actually have a broader set of clients supporting if we can finish out the Java implementation and then, you know, look into the Python, which I actually think is a little more straightforward to do. I think Talit has been waiting because you don't have a number next to your hand.
Oh, really? Okay. I actually reviewed the Prashant's, you know, the design previews, and we discussed offline. I have I see one issue. Maybe, you know, forgive me if I have a misinformation. You know, in our spec we don't have any policy definition. You know, maybe we should capture the policy definition in general, whatever the implementation. It's independent from the implementation. And the second thing is that I like his idea, but you know, at the same time, I know, you know, most of you guys most probably use that, you know, the S3, for example, support the proxy endpoint, which basically you can redirect all of the requests to another endpoint and you can retrieve your data. Rather than implementing the view and table load mechanism, I believe that there could be another approach, like, you know, the catalog can return a proxy endpoint, and the proxy endpoint may filter out the things like, if you don't want to give the columns, then, you know, that Lambda function can, you know, filter out the data and just return the data to engine. And this concept can enable us to, we don't require a trusted engine concept. And everybody, whoever used like Python, Java, whoever used that, they can directly read data via the proxy, and the proxy can be responsible by the catalog itself, and whoever used the catalog, they can follow the proxy endpoint. And there is no additional implementation on the client side, but at the same time, we can implement the FCAC in general. So there's a two caveat. One is that if we are doing in the real time, that returning the, you know, the modified data, it's a computational cost. There's a computational cost, but if user doesn't want to do that computational cost, they can do offline calculation and you know, generate the data and put on another S3 bucket. And this is, then there is a storage cost, but there is no computational cost.
I think one other question then is that if we have a proxy endpoint, like I totally understand the proxy endpoint and the scanning planning as well. So one thing that was there, that how will we handle caching then? Because the proxy endpoint, based on the user who has authenticated, will give back a different set of data, right? So which cache are we okay to compromise and which cache we are not okay to compromise with is another question. Because in script, I think this whole approach bottles down to having a user-aware caching. That can you cache this based on what the calling user is, or should you have a user-specific cache for a table? Because I think it's fine to do that. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be user specific. You know, it's basically based on the policy. And if the policy is, you know, we can also enable the caching on, you know, the Lambda side, like whenever it just, you know, to stream the data, it can also stream, you know, a place for caching. And, you know, it should not be based on the user. It has to be based on the policy. That's why I'm saying that we should introduce some policy definition independent from any implementation. Then any implementation can follow that policy definition.
Ryan, I think you're next. I see a number one next to your hand. So
yes, yeah, and I do see numbers that actually count down based on when hands go down. So maybe that's just me. I wanted to make a couple points. First of all, the view context passing in Spark, I think, would be fairly easy because of how we actually support views in Spark, because we actually rewrite all of the unresolved relations when we load the view. So what you would do is just keep that in a unresolved relation, so that when you resolve that, you also pass the view context. So that would actually be fairly easy to demonstrate in Spark if we wanted to prototype this. As far as the scan planning APIs and you know, the idea of like a proxy or record service that performs reads, I think that those are, you know, really like further down the chain in terms of complexity. For complexity, we have, you know, at least for trusted engines, like we have the scan planning stuff, which puts all of the complexity on the service to either produce data files, you know, for fine-grained access, or to, you know, figure out which data files can be used. But like that's actually fairly straightforward. But I think that there is a performance and a big gain to be had by doing this trusted engine approach, right? Scan planning would always work if you have a very complex service and completely untrusted clients. But if you have a trusted client, you can run the filters client side. And that's not a bad idea. So that's why I think building a trusted view, or sorry, building a secure view system is definitely something that we want to do. And then we can explore further down that added complexity. You know, it could be that the added complexity is like you return a proxy endpoint for every split, where you can just go and you know, scan data out once you've done the scan planning, right? So there are lots of things that we can actually do to you know, take Dan's idea and Talat's ideas and make those happen in the near term. But it all sort of boils down to, we should probably be doing both. We need both scan planning and ways for trusted engines to operate. But again, like I don't want to get too distracted by this dynamic view stuff, because it either will work or it won't. And I don't think that there's anything we can do to block services from actually returning them.
I think I have a green one at this time. I want to circle back a little bit. I mean, we were all just talking about selecting data. But as far as I understand, Trino APIs do support at least row filtering, right side, like inserts get rejected if you're inserting against a protected row. Update delete, I think, works similarly. So, and that also feels doable in Spark, from my understanding. So that's actually a very nice functionality, I think. But all that comes down to having as Ryan basically also mentioned, is we need a proper way to express these policies in a portable way. And then we can have trusted engines, we can have these proxy services or data file rewriting services, whatever. They can work then in read-only mode, in write mode, and whatever. I think that could be a way forward. Prashant?
Yeah, I was just like wondering on that part of the portability of the policies, and you know, we were thinking that if we model these things in Iceberg expressions, that would be better, and if Iceberg expressions can be expanded to contain references to UDFs, and within UDFs, if you want like some IR or you know, even like a SQL which is dialect specific, that's fine. At this point of time, we are just modeling it as views. and wanted to know what are your thoughts on that. So that's one question I had. The other question was still on the caching part of the things like when we have like scan planning and when we have proxy, right? The policies based on which these data files, new data files will be emitted will depend on the user that has authenticated or a user that has called that particular scan planning API. So it will be the applicable policies to the user based on which these new files are generated and then sent back. So it's not just policy, it's applicable policies to the user. So wanted to know it, how will we deal with caching there? If we say that caching is a problem of just table level, we are even going into more granular as a tape, like a file level, and solve that.
Can I just talk to the first point? I think like I saw Ryan's head nodding. I think we're all generally in agreement that we like want better Iceberg expression support. We want to be able to reference UDFs. Like those things are all kind of like, I think there's general agreement that that seems like a good direction to go. I would contrast that with Russell's concern about like expediency and like, you know, trying to get something out there. You know, because like getting like fully fleshing out like expressions, UDFs, you know, like they're in discussion, like we're doing things in that space too. And the question is like, can we solve the near-term problems in a way that doesn't like compromise us or cause, you know, bad behaviors that we have to unravel in the future? And that's where I'm like, if we lean into FGAC, it feels like that's, or the scan planning with the FGAC, that feels closer. You know, just from an implementation perspective, I think we could actually close that out relatively quickly. Like you've been working on that, I know. And so I don't know what the interim is other than, you know, I guess one other possibility would be that we actually use view definitions for something like this and not allow them to be defined as table and just like avoid the whole table switching thing. That still potentially causes some problems because we have all the other things that we've been talking about. But if we at least say, let's make things what they are and don't like, you know, turn tables into views and, you know, back depending on context, maybe we can avoid some of the worst. Robert?
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the question about user context and cacheability, that's a tough question, I think. I mean, consider someone gets nuked from a company, gets his boots, all access is immediately terminated. So whether you can cache that for a user, I don't think so. You can potentially cache the say protection rules like the row filter, current transformations, whatever, and compare that, but it could be tricky. It could be a security issue from HR perspective in that case. So maybe a case-by-case decision, I don't know.
Okay, we're kind of at time.
Yeah, if you guys have more feedbacks, please feel free to drop in the talk. We are looking forward to, and yeah, that's the last request. Yeah.
This might be a good thing to include the video and follow up on the mailing list, just because, yeah, I don't think there was any response on the Iceberg dev list, and just to like make people aware of the discussion.
Oh, was this also forwarded to the Iceberg list? I thought it was just on this.
No, it was on the Iceberg list.
Okay, cool.
So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I think Jonas is going to post a video right after this. And have a nice day. See you next time.
Thanks,
See you.
guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.